I've changed my mind about this over the years. One of the things that I've grown less suspicious of is the notion that it is in the end the private sector which drives economic growth in most of the poor countries that I've worked in. And I think the other thing that's important to say by way of preamble is that when we talk about business, it's very often with the assumption we're talking about Western businesses, multinational companies that go in. But a lot of the important business in poor countries is from local businessmen, in Africa in particular, which is the area I know about, because that's where I spent most of my working time on this in this area. There's a rapidly growing entrepreneurial class in Africa, and they're making significant contribution to economic growth and to the alleviation of poverty. What drives business engagement? Well, as has been said, it's about money. It's about opportunities. Where are the places that they have opportunities? Where are the places that they feel they have genuine prospects of success? And it's worth thinking about. I was at a meeting recently, and African businessmen were talking about what were the three things, the top three things that constrained growth, and they were poor infrastructure. Power cuts, exorbitant transport costs, long lead times for delivery by road and rail. Those are the daily experiences of businessmen in Africa. Equally, on the upside, if you look at something like the way that the mobile phone has utterly transformed Africa, it's leapfrogged the old landline infrastructure. There's more web penetration, mobile phone penetration in Africa now than there is in China. It's transforming the place. In Senegal, fishermen ring from their boats to the different ports to find out where the prices are best so they know where to land. You can phone the local clinic to find out if there's a doctor there. I was in Ethiopia and talking to a farmer, and he was phoning around the local markets to find out which town to take his products. Second big constraint is finance, a lack of access to predictable and reliable sources of capital. And the third constraint is corruption. So is business helping with this or hindering it? I think, again, I'll start with a good story. I was talking to the chief executive of SmithKline Beecham recently, and he was talking about how all of their research and development budget had traditionally been driven by the fact that you look for where you can make the most money. You look for drugs like, slimming drugs because that's where the demand is in the West. You don't look for a cure for malaria because there's not big money to be made there. And he has turned this thinking round to a certain extent. His first thought was that you don't have to have a single model for your markets. You can have that high profit model for the West. But in Africa, you can have a model which is, let's have high turnover, small profit margins on something, and you can still make money from that. The second thing that he said that I thought was interesting was that he felt that they had a social responsibility to develop a malaria vaccine, and they're just about to launch one. They think they've cracked the malaria vaccine, and their thinking there is that it's a social responsibility, but it's also about growing a market. This is the area where they can sell other drugs in future, and so it's not a kind of an entirely altruistic activity. It's about creating the bigger market. The other thing that I think is important to say is that economic growth is no good unless it actually helps poor people participate in that growth. And that's not necessarily something that the business is going to achieve on its own. And that is where civil society, and in particular governments, and governments under pressure from civil society, have a role to make sure that the partnership is built, which is, as Professor Stiglitz said, is about aligning the interests of businesses and the local society. The bad stuff, well, that's clear enough. If you look at something like the Daewoo land grab deal in Mauritius, they had their 1.3 million hectares of farmland, which is about an area about the size of Belgium, and they were going to grow maize and palm oil there and export it all to South Korea, and they weren't going to pay Mauritius anything for it. The deal was you'll get some jobs, we'll improve some infrastructure. So that is pretty much old-fashioned, rapacious, neo-colonialist exploitation, and that is still part of the business model. On the other hand, if you look at Mauritius again, the Chinese have helped a lot there in developing the garment industry in a way which has been constructive. So the second area, the third, I won't touch on finance, but the third area that they mentioned was corruption. And it's clear the more and more time you spend in a place like Africa that there is a predatory elite which adopts a rent-seeking posture, essentially. And one of the things that's missing from my point of view as a journalist in a place like Africa, or in places like Africa, I should say, is a lack of a good local media to hold governments to account on this. The sunshine of the disinfectant of sunshine is not shone on most of these elites because they are self-reinforcing. One of the things that it's important to do from a donor country point of view is to help build some of these media services there. And the final thing I'd say on corruption is that there have been some successes, things like the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. It's had limited success, but it's nonetheless putting down the right kind of marker, and it's establishing the kind of codes of conduct that Professor Stiglitz was talking about being in the interests of public companies. And some constructive thought from civil society on how you deal with the difference between the Cargills, the private companies, and the big public ones would be a useful area for development.